Welcome to Accommodate This. My name is David, and I'm a late diagnosed autistic adult. I was terminated from my job in 2023 after reporting workplace misconduct and abuse. Before I was terminated, I reached out to Human Resources for help curbing that abuse and to ask for accommodations. But they ultimately believed my manager's distorted stories about me and neglected to properly investigate my complaints. Unfortunately, this is a pattern of discrimination faced by many people in the neurodivergent community who struggle to find, obtain, and retain employment. So I've decided to use my own voice to shed light on the abuses that I suffered. Only 15% of autistics are fully employed because we face discrimination and other barriers at every phase in the hiring process, and if and when we ask for accommodations. My hope is that I can shed some light on these barriers and provide some insights on how to move forward in a more equitable manner. And now that you know why we're here, let's get into the topic for this video: human resources. Let's be clear. This is not a personal attack on HR or that profession. This video is a call for a renewed commitment to the core values and principles that HR should embody. The goal of mine is to ensure that HR practices truly dignify and support all individuals, especially those in the neurodivergent community who have often been neglected. The status quo just isn't cutting it. We need real systemic change. I have immense respect for the HR profession, thanks to my mother who shared inspiring stories of her time in HR. She was a dedicated leader who saved her company significant money and helped countless employees return to work. And because of her, I initially viewed HR as a source for good, protecting both employees and employers. However, my own experiences with HR and further research have revealed a troubling reality. My mother was the exception, not the rule. As previously mentioned, neurodivergent individuals face barriers in each phase of employment. I'm going to cover 6 of those phases in this video and discuss some of the barriers neurodivergent communities face in each stage. You can find all sorts of resources and charts online describing the hiring process differently, but I've limited this to 6 stages just to keep it simple. I will list all my resources in the comments if you want more detailed information. And now on to phase 1, application. Finding suitable jobs can be a challenge for neurodivergent individuals. Our unique communication styles and perspectives often clash with the traditional job descriptions and expectations. Terms like excellent communication skills can be daunting, as we may interpret them literally and fear judgment. Many of us struggle with communication, and yet much of the time, employers appear more interested in social skills than they are in actual job-related skills and qualifications, and that just makes it harder for us to know if we're truly a good fit or not. Then there's the decision to disclose our disability. In the United States, where I'm from, our government recognized the huge disparity between employment for the neurodivergent community compared to the rest of society, so they offered incentives to employers for hiring disabled individuals. Now, this is intended to make it easier for employers to justify hiring a disabled person by providing a subsidy so the employer can lower costs without affecting the base pay for the disabled person. But in order to qualify for those subsidies, employers need a paper trail, which adds another layer onto the complexity of the application phase. While well-intended, disclosure this early in the process can contribute to the stigma that we are damaged goods. Employers may also prefer to avoid the extra administrative costs associated with obtaining and retaining applicable documentation. And the extra politics involved in proving they qualify for those incentives can be difficult, and they may want to avoid that extra layer of work. They may also worry about added costs for accommodations. And then suddenly it's less about providing opportunities and more about deterring employers from considering disabled applicants in the first place. Because of this, there's a temptation to not disclose disabilities. But then we encounter threatening language about certifying that the information we provided is complete and accurate. or else. But most neurodivergent individuals take this seriously and will openly disclose our disabled status out of fear of punishment if we don't. Now, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, claims that employers are not allowed to ask disability-related questions until after the job is offered. And yet most applications these days are done online, and online applications typically have the disability disclosure question embedded directly into the form. Even government agencies ask applicants to disclose if they have a disability at the time of applying, as I discovered when I made an attempt to apply for a job that was open to the public but listed on a government website. That was USAJOBS.gov. On that site, if you do disclose that you have a disability, you are required to provide additional documentation. And that documentation is sometimes called a Schedule A, which is just a fancy term for a doctor's note. To qualify for hiring incentives, that Schedule A is required. This can be both time-consuming to obtain and an added stressor for the applicant. I tried this out myself. When I went to USAJOBS.com, I attempted to apply for a position that was open to the public, so no special clearance was necessary. I was unable to submit the application because it stops you if you disclose that you have a disability, and then it requires you to provide that extra documentation before it will move forward. They do admit that hiring officials are prohibited from asking questions about an applicant's disability unless the questions are related to functioning on the job and consistent with the business needs of the position. And yet that disclosure question is typically part of the application phase, which happens way before the company official looks at it, let alone before we get an interview. This essentially has become a modern-day catch-22, which was designed by the military to discriminate against the LGBTQ community in the mid-1900s. We'll talk more about this later in the video. Automation is just further exacerbating these challenges. While companies claim that disability disclosure doesn't affect hiring decisions, automated systems may still favor non-disabled candidates. And removing the human aspect of this process may save precious time, but it potentially excludes a large percentage of qualified candidates who also happen to have a disability, regardless of the type. And this puts neurodivergent individuals in the same category as people with other disabilities, which is not exactly a fair approach. To improve job prospects for neurodivergent individuals, we need more inclusive job descriptions, flexible application processes, and greater awarenesses of the unique challenges that we face. Neurodivergent individuals also face unique challenges during the screening process. Now, traditional screening methods typically prioritize conformity and standardized skills, and those can be exclusionary for those who are incapable of conforming. There's a lack of understanding in general. Many hiring managers don't fully understand how neurodivergence can manifest in the workplace. And take autism, for example. We often hear, "Oh, I'm familiar with autism. I have an autistic niece or nephew or cousin or sister or whatever." This completely ignores the fact that every autistic person is unique, and we all have different support needs. It's not like a broken arm, which can basically be treated the same way no matter who has the broken arm. But with neurodiversity, it's about the brain, which is millions of times more complicated. So this line of thinking often leads to biased assessments of candidates. Then there's the automated screening. Automated systems, which are often designed to filter candidates based on specific keywords and criteria, may overlook qualified neurodivergent applicants. And with stereotypes and biases about neurodivergence, those can actually influence hiring decisions, even if they're not intentional. So for this phase in the process, I recommend improving the screening processes by educating hiring managers. Provide training on neurodiversity and how to recognize and accommodate our unique strengths, such as our superior attention to detail, strong work ethics, and a higher sense of justice and integrity. Rethink the screening criteria. Evaluate whether traditional screening criteria are truly relevant to the job, and consider alternative ways to assess candidates' skills. And that brings me to another option where we consider alternative assessment methods. Explore alternative assessment methods such as structured interviews or work samples that can provide more accurate picture of a candidate's abilities. The interview process can be particularly challenging for neurodivergent individuals. Our unique communication styles may not align with traditional expectations, and that can lead to misunderstandings and potential bias. I remember being interviewed and the hiring manager was glaring at me the whole time as if I wasn't making any sense. He was clearly looking for something that I wasn't providing, and we had a breakdown in communication, which was obvious, but he wasn't talking about it and I wasn't going to bring it up. And this is common between two individuals with different neurotypes. We have communication difficulties because neurodivergent individuals, even those who mask their symptoms, may struggle with social interactions and verbal communication. There's also a lack of understanding here where the hiring managers who may be unfamiliar with neurodivergence may misinterpret our communication styles or behaviors. And then unconscious biases can lead to discrimination against neurodivergent candidates, even if they are qualified. So to improve the interview process, provide training to hiring managers about neurodiversity and how to conduct inclusive interviews. We should consider alternative assessment processes, like I said before, where we explore different methods such as written exercises or practical tasks that can evaluate the candidate's skills without relying solely on verbal communication. And try to create a welcoming environment. Make the interview process as comfortable as possible and inclusive as possible for neurodivergent candidates by eliminating unnecessary stimuli and asking direct, unambiguous questions. You may consider turning down the lights or maybe turning off any background music that may be playing. The validation stage involves reference checks and background checks, but this can also present challenges for the neurodivergent individuals. We have to come up with references, and that may be difficult when we had bad experiences in past jobs. Reputational bias is a real factor here because references may focus on the social skills and interpersonal interactions, which can be difficult for neurodivergent individuals who just don't conform to traditional expectations. A lack of understanding here is difficult for us because hiring managers don't understand our unique challenges, and they potentially lead to negative interpretations of the references that we do provide. So to improve the validation process, organizations should prioritize work performance, focus on references that provide insights into a candidate's work quality and accomplishments, rather than solely on social skills. Educate the hiring managers. Again, it's important that they understand what neurodivergence is about. Raise awareness about neurodiversity and the potential biases that can influence reference checks. And then finally, consider alternative validation methods, like explore methods such as skills assessments or work samples to validate a candidate's qualifications, rather than reputation. Now, if you've reached the offer stage, congratulations. The job offer process typically involves discussing your start date, so when you'll begin your role, any sort of compensation like your salary and your benefits, any steps you need to take to be onboarded properly, like preparing for your first day, completing the necessary paperwork, obtaining uniforms, and the like. This is also the stage where if you do have a disability, it's a good time to discuss any necessary accommodations. And this is also the point at which the employer is allowed to ask disability-related questions. Now, I looked at the government job site, USAJOBS.gov, to confirm when it was appropriate to discuss disability-related questions. And it was a bit confusing. At first glance, it appeared to limit employers from asking disability-related questions until they've offered the applicant a job. However, when you dig a little deeper, you'll find the exceptions pretty much allow them to ask as soon as the applicants disclose that they have a disability, which now happens at the time of applying. They're also allowed to ask questions even if the employer simply suspects an accommodation may be needed. So even if you're high masking, there's a risk your disability will be discovered in any phase. And in which case, all they need to do is ask if you need accommodation without inquiring about your specific condition. And then once that's disclosed, they're able to ask you more and more questions based on the information you provide, essentially getting around that whole not asking disability-related questions. And basically, these exceptions neutralize the limitations that were set on employers under the law and gives them free rein to ask whatever disability-related questions they want from the get-go. Now, they do caution on their site that if the applicant is rejected after asking about their disability, then it might appear or give the impression that the rejection was based on results of that question. But fear not, the EEOC advises employers who reject individuals due to disability to just simply demonstrate that the rejection is job-related and document that it wasn't discrimination. Basically, they can be cleared of any liability and discriminate anyways as long as they document that they didn't do that. And in the end, the employer's word is going to be taken over the word of the applicant. Now, as of the time of this recording, these guidelines are published on the USAJOBS.gov website, basically sanctioning blatant discrimination against disabled applicants. These government-sponsored guidelines offer more protections for the majority while offering lip service to the minority. Now imagine how much worse this experience can be in the private sector, which is much less regulated than the government. It's quite scary to know compliance with the law is subject to the whims of the employer. And even if they don't comply to the law, that's okay. How is that helping? Back to the topic at hand. Assuming everything is on the up and up, let's talk about accommodations. We all have different needs, but unfortunately, there's an assumed cost for accommodating anyone with a disability, even though most accommodations for the neurodivergent individual are simple, cost-effective, and benefit all employees. Some examples may include flexible work arrangements, like allowing them to have remote work or flexible schedules. Or how about communication adjustments where they provide meeting agendas in advance or use email and text to communicate instead of picking up the phone, or offering alternative communication options all across the board. Plus, there's the issue that, hey, if there was just a little bit of education out there, things would be a whole lot better. So raise awareness to staff about neurodiversity and the potential biases out there, and then foster a culture that's slow to judge and more accepting of neurological differences. Now, once you're hired, human resources typically has two main roles: managing human assets for a profitable return on investment for the shareholders, and ensuring that those human assets have the appropriate knowledge, expertise, and attitudes to produce quality work. HR plays a critical role in creating inclusive workplaces for all employees, including those who are neurodivergent. But again, neurodivergent individuals are often facing unique challenges in the workplace that they're not aware of, and HR departments could be playing a vital role in supporting them. Some of the challenges faced by neurodivergent employees is that we may have difficulty with communication, social interactions, sensory processing, and executive functioning. And these challenges make it difficult for us to navigate the traditional workplace environment. And because these are experiences that the majority doesn't have, understanding and acceptance are scarce. So HR can take several steps to create inclusive workplaces. They can raise awareness, again, educate your employees about neurodiversity and the unique challenges faced by neurodivergent individuals. Create inclusive policies and practices. Develop policies and practices that accommodate the needs of neurodivergent employees. Offer training to managers and employees on how to interact effectively with neurodivergent colleagues. Offer accommodations. Basically, provide reasonable accommodations to help neurodivergent employees succeed in their roles. And then foster a culture of inclusion. The benefits of supporting neurodivergent employees are numerous, but here's just a few. It will improve productivity. We often carry with us unique skills in the neurodivergent community and unique perspectives that can benefit the organization. We usually enhance innovation because a diverse workforce drives innovation and creativity. It will improve employee morale. A supportive and inclusive workplace is known to boost employee morale and job satisfaction. And then organizations that are committed to diversity and inclusion can attract and retain top talent because it enhances their reputation. So to conclude, it's going to take some time to implement enough improvements to make a difference in hiring and support practices across the board. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, for my neurodivergent friends, here are some things to watch out for. As cynical as it sounds, HR in the modern era will try to protect the company and their own job above yours. Regardless of what the company policies may say or how nice they treat you in public, HR is not your friend. But that doesn't make them your enemy either. They're simply people, and to them, you are an asset that can be replaced. And if you are in the minority, you are definitely outnumbered, and they can use that fact to their benefit to both control staff and to deter unacceptable behavior. So know that you are under a level of scrutiny that your coworkers aren't. And watch your back because the majority will not take you seriously if you report abuses that they see as normal human interaction. HR will attempt to control the narrative from the time that you apply through the hiring process and even at termination. And this includes fabricating documentation to show that they're innocent of any wrongdoing and therefore not liable for punishment. Those of us in the neurodivergent community are always at risk of being misinterpreted when interacting with the majority. They can and will make assumptions and draw conclusions as they please. They are not above lying or hiding facts. And in my experience, some people in HR will even attempt to cover up issues by distorting the facts in ways that make them sound more credible, particularly if they are just there to do a job and don't really care about the people they're responsible for developing. Minimal compliance translates to minimal liability. So they're going to take the fewest amount of steps possible to reduce the chance of making another mistake. As in my case, HR never spoke to the references I provided, and they could have corroborated my side of the story. But if they did reach out to them, it would have complicated matters for HR. So instead, they took a biased approach, looking for anything to support their preconceived conclusion and ignore anything that might contradict that. Yes, this is dishonest, but lying is not illegal. And remember, they're balancing risks, costs, and benefits, and are willing to document the situation with as much bias as they deem necessary to protect the company or themselves. While neurodivergent individuals thrive in details, many people in the majority avoid looking at details. They understand that the deeper they get into an issue, the more details tend to crop up, and so they're just looking for the bare minimum to establish that they are not at risk if you were to turn around and sue them later. They know that you have to be able to put forth a ton of money to sue them to begin with. So that barrier alone protects them. But if you do get enough money and are able to sue them, then you have to counter every single one of their lies, which can be very daunting. They'll take the minimal steps to show their compliance, but they're not obligated to actually treat you like a human being. They are going to use documentation in their favor. And if you live in the US, you have every right to do the same. I'm no lawyer and I can't speak for the laws in other countries, so please talk to a lawyer for actual legal advice. But here's what I learned from my experience working in the US. Documentation is going to be key in proving your case, especially if you suspect that your employer is intentionally hiding evidence. Document all of your interactions, including who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, both dates and times, what was said, who else was there, your thoughts and feelings on the matters discussed, and anything else that you can think of that may be relevant. This goes for your interactions with harassers, with leaders, and with HR. And make sure you have access to that documentation outside of work. The last thing you want to do is put all those notes together on your work computer and then lose access to it once you're terminated. Of course, you also want to remain compliant with information protection laws, so be sure to redact any protected information. And redact just means either black it out, blur it out, or remove it completely. You don't want to put yourself at risk of committing a breach, which comes with hefty fines and even possible jail time. Now, in my case, much of the evidence to prove that I was being harassed was hidden behind a firewall, and it was my fear of possible breach that kept me from sending much of my notes home. But looking back, I wish I had. As long as you redact the protected information, you should be safe. And if you aren't sure, please consult a lawyer. Many of them will offer a 1-hour consultation where they will be happy to answer any questions you may have free of charge. Documentation will be your saving grace, and it's often needed before you can even secure a lawyer, because they're going to weigh the available evidence against the claims on both sides and then determine if you have a winnable case or not. I hope you don't have to experience this, but if you find yourself in a situation where you're being unfairly treated, you have every right to stand up for yourself. Try to do it calmly, of course, and if you can, because I know it's difficult when you're in burnout or mid-meltdown. But in any case, I would always recommend that you document as much as you can, because depending on your own memory can work against you. When it comes to HR and their treatment of the neurodivergent community, there's a lot of room for improvement. But we have to remember human resources professionals, like everyone else, are human beings with strengths and weaknesses. While some are dedicated to the truth and supportive of differences, others may not be. I've shown how many neurodivergent individuals face discrimination at every stage of the hiring process, on the job, and even when seeking help from HR. So be cautious and protect yourself. If we hope to create more inclusive workplaces, first and foremost, we need to raise awareness about neurodiversity and the unique challenges faced by neurodivergent individuals. At every phase in this process, there was a need for better education and knowledge of the neurodivergent community. Now, education is definitely key, but not everyone is well positioned to talk about it. Neurodivergence is a complicated topic, and it will require more than simply looking up a few terms on the internet and then winging it. So leaving the task of educating the masses shouldn't just be left to the majority, who will often misinterpret us or who will have little incentive to cover anything in depth. Whomever ends up providing education needs to be cognizant of what they are doing and saying, or they may end up encouraging more stigma. We need to reinsert humanity, compassion, and honesty back into human resources. Otherwise, what are we doing? Going through the motions and just moving from task to task, treating people solely as commodities, is actually hurting people. We need to re-examine the guidelines and regulations that allow too many people to be discriminated against. Currently, 85% of the autistic community is underemployed or unemployed, and any incentives to hire someone with a disability are embarrassingly hollow and ineffective. We have to do better. By promoting integrity, understanding, mindfulness, and acceptance, we can drive positive change and create a more equitable future for all. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, try another one.